The ruins of Virion Spire still breathed smoke and metal when Cale Arden stepped over the charred remains of what used to be a street-level plaza. The city, if one could still call it that, was a carcass of shattered alloy and scorched sky bridges, left gutted by the Obsidian Core's final assault. High above, the fractured silhouette of a failed orbital tether hung like a broken needle against the planet's amber dusk, its cables trailing smoke into the upper atmosphere. Cale's boots cracked over pulverized synth glass. His exosuit's servos hissed with each step, compensating for the jagged terrain. He wasn't supposed to be here, not really. The official orders had called for extraction 2 clicks west at an old maintenance shaft, but curiosity or something heavier drew him toward the last transmission point of a fallen scout team. Something about the coordinates it pinged. They felt wrong, too clean, too deliberate. The underground entry point, half buried under debris, opened with a grunt of effort. He descended through a collapsed cargo shaft, flashlight slicing through layers of smoke and dust. His HUD flickered as radiation spiked then dropped. A faint energy signature pulsed nearby, steady, rhythmic. Organic. What he found in the shattered chamber below wasn't salvage or wreckage, but a figure bound in a containment frame. She hung by her wrists, suspended in a harness of half-melted Lysari alloy. Her skin was a brilliant cerulean slick with dried blood and sweat streaked with soot. Platinum white hair clung to her cheeks in damp strands. The remains of a tactical suit leather weaves and metallic filaments clung to her body like armor grown from bone. But her weapon was still in her hand. A compact plasma pistol crusted with grime but powered was pointed directly at him. Her lips parted slightly, then curled in defiance. He raised his hands slowly, not in fear but in recognition. "Not here to shoot," Cale murmured, his voice low. His eyes scanned her dehydration compression bruises, cortical implant burn. She'd been tortured or left to rot. She didn't lower the pistol, but her aim faltered. The chamber buzzed with faint residual current. Her containment had been a power siphon, not a cell. Something in her bones had powered something else. The barrel of her weapon trembled. Cale stepped closer. "You've been left behind," he said quietly. "You're not their prisoner. You're their battery." And then he did the one thing no tactician would recommend. He set his rifle down and reached up to unlock the restraints. With deliberate motion, he triggered the manual release on the magnetic cuffs. The bindings hissed open and she collapsed into his arms. The first contact of their bodies was electric, not metaphorically, but in a literal surge. Static hissed through Cale's comms, and a blue shimmer burst across the HUD, as if something in her skin rejected the touch, then hesitated, then allowed it. She gritted her teeth, weight slumping against him. He lifted her up effortlessly. Her skin was far warmer than expected, her breathing erratic. As he shouldered her weight, she whispered something in Lysari tongue. Cale didn't understand the words, but the tone was a cross between defiance and despair. He made his way out of the pit, his grip tight around her waist. A low rumble sounded behind them, fissures in the bunker roof. Whatever energy field that had kept the place intact was now dying. Dust poured like ash from the ceiling. Outside, the light stung. The world had gone gold and blood red under Virion's twin suns. In the distance, Cale could hear the hum of approaching patrol drones. They had 10, maybe 15 minutes before this sector was crawling with scanners. He set her down beside a wrecked grav bike and pulled open his ration kit. The canteen hissed open. He offered her the nozzle. Her eyes, an impossible violet shot with silver, narrowed in suspicion. Then she drank. "Name?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Her voice was raw, but it carried a resonance he couldn't place. "Saris Thane." Cale didn't recognize it, but he nodded. "Cale Arden." Her gaze drifted to the collapsed skyline. "You're human." "Still am, last time I checked." She eyed the burns on her arms, then the melted seal ports on her uniform. "They were going to harvest me." Cale didn't ask who. The answer was obvious. Saris tried to rise, but staggered. Cale caught her again, this time bracing her with an arm around her shoulders. Her body fit awkwardly against his. Taller than most humans, built like a coiled spring. But there was a familiarity in the heat of her skin and the weight of her leaning that unnerved him. They moved together toward the burned-out freeway that carved through the outer districts. Cale's extraction beacon was offline. But he knew the layout of Virion's industrial underground. If they could make it to the tram rails, they could bypass patrols, maybe even find shelter. As they walked, Saris said nothing. but she never let go of the plasma pistol. Kale noticed how her steps synced with his, how her breathing leveled with his rhythm. And then she spoke not a question, but a declaration. "You shouldn't have freed me." Kale glanced at her sidelong. "Maybe not. Why did you—" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the skyline, eyes narrowing on a distant glint drone. "Scouts, maybe." Then he exhaled. "Because when I saw you down there, he said you didn't look like the enemy. You looked like someone the war forgot." She said nothing to that, but she didn't pull away. They kept walking. And behind them, in the cratered silence of the collapsed bunker, a faint pulse remained in the ruined containment frame, one final flicker of a technology older than either of them echoing across invisible spectra. The bond had already begun. The air thickened as they moved deeper into the crumbling underbelly of Virion's spire. Charred support columns leaned like broken spines above their heads. Ash fell from the upper levels like gray snow, and the concrete underfoot was scorched black from blast residue and plasma scoring. Kale guided Saris with an instinctive steadiness. She still limped, and her coordination was far from perfect, but her pride refused to let him carry her again. He respected that, even as he watched her stumble over loose rubble and catch herself just before falling. He handed her a stabilizer stick. She eyed it with suspicion before taking a sharp bite. The nutrient bar was made for soldiers, not pallets. It tasted like dust and iron, but it fueled her body with what she needed. The improvement was visible within minutes. Saris pulled the thermal cloak tighter around her body. The Laysari weave shimmered under the ambient light like flowing mercury streaked with battle-worn matte finish. Beneath the alien uniform and residual burns, her posture was shifting, less collapsed, more coiled. She was recovering. They reached an old transit junction abandoned long before the siege, its rails twisted and useless. A blast door scorched with radiation pitting stood half ajar at the far end of the corridor. Beyond it, a maintenance tunnel stretched downward, vanishing into black. Kale led the way, adjusting his rifle as he went. The air inside smelled of damp rust and ozone. Behind him, Saris broke the silence. "You risked your mission for me." "I wasn't on a mission," Kale replied. "Not anymore." "That's a lie." He glanced back. Her eyes gleamed in the dark like twin eclipses. He said nothing, but the silence held a weight that made further questions unnecessary. They walked for a time in silence broken only by the distant creak of settling metal and the occasional hiss of steam from ruptured conduits. Eventually, Saris spoke again. "Humans are strange." Kale half smiled. "We get that a lot. You talk too much, and you touch too easily." "That last one wasn't really optional," he said, gesturing toward the restraints she'd been locked in. She ignored the sarcasm. "But you could have left me. Should have. I don't make a habit of leaving people to die in machines they didn't choose." Another silence. This time it settled like a truce. They found a buried access point likely missed by most scavengers because of the collapsed elevator shaft above. Kale climbed first, then reached down to pull Saris up after. Her grip was strong, her hands surprisingly soft beneath calloused fingertips. The moment their palms met, a static tingle danced across his arm again, like a residual charge or something more fundamental. He didn't flinch. They emerged into a hollowed-out rail terminal, half-flooded and overgrown with bioluminescent moss that pulsed faintly with ambient energy. The station had been abandoned decades ago but retained power. Faint green lines of residual circuit flow still traced across the ceiling. Saris moved ahead this time, scanning with her own device a palm-sized orb of shifting crystal that vibrated when in proximity to energy fields. Kale couldn't help but watch her as she moved. The way her body navigated the terrain with feline awareness, her eyes scanning every angle, the disciplined flow of her motion. It was professional, trained. But beneath it, something else had begun to flicker. He saw the way her gaze occasionally drifted to him. Not hostile anymore. Curious. As they set up temporary rest behind a service panel, Kale unrolled a thermal mat. Saris stood nearby, arms crossed, hesitant. She looked at him like she was weighing a puzzle with no single solution. "You don't know what I am," she said finally. No, Kale agreed, "but I know you're not what they said." "What did they say?" "That Laysari don't feel, that they don't bond, that they only fight use and betray." Saris's eyes narrowed. "And yet you freed me anyway. Maybe I'm just bad at following orders." She lowered herself beside him on the mat. Her shoulder brushed his as she settled in. The contact was accidental, but neither of them moved away. "There was a time," she said slowly, "when I believed that connection was weakness, that solitude was strength, that every touch was a threat. And now, her gaze lingered on the glow of the moss reflecting off the chamber walls. Now I don't know. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded with questions, unspoken threads of trust being tentatively woven. Kale shifted slightly. You don't have to explain anything to me. I'm not your interrogator. No, she said softly, but you're still a soldier. Ex-soldier. Still human. He gave a dry chuckle. That one's harder to shake. She turned her head toward him, and the glow lit the angular cut of her cheekbones, the elegant slope of her jaw. There was a weariness in her eyes, but not defeat. Something stubborn pulsed behind them. Something deeply alive. You don't flinch from me, she said. Most do. I've never liked flinching, Kale replied. The moment between them hung there fragile but undeniable. Then Saris leaned back, looking up at the curved ceiling. There's something beneath this place, she murmured. Do you feel it? Kale frowned. He opened his sensor array. The readings were erratic spikes of quantum distortion, faint but real. Below them, something pulsed at a frequency barely measurable. That's not a reactor. Saris nodded slowly. It's older. Precursor tech. The ether signature, it matches the energy field they used to hold me. Kale's jaw tightened. You think this whole ruin is built on top of something ancient? I know it. Then we're not safe here. No, Cerise said, rising to her feet, but we may not have a choice. Kale followed her gaze to a half-buried terminal in the far corner. The interface shimmered faintly with glyphs he couldn't read. Saris approached it slowly, one hand outstretched, and when her fingertips brushed the panel, the room shuddered. Circuits bloomed to life in a ripple of blue light. The moss receded, the water stilled, and a hatch opened beneath their feet, revealing a spiral descent of polished obsidian. Saris looked over her shoulder at Kale. I think we've just found the heart of it. The stairs spiraled downward like a helix into the unknown. Each step lit up as they descended, a ripple of blue-white energy pulsing beneath their boots, as if the structure recognized their presence. The light responded more strongly to Saris, flickering brighter where she stepped, almost like reverence. Kale kept his rifle slung low, but powered. The walls around them were smoother than anything he'd seen, too perfect to be machined by modern tools. They bore no seams, no weld lines. Just flowing architecture that curved with organic grace, like the structure had been grown rather than built. At the base of the stairwell, a circular chamber yawned open before them. Its heart held a crystalline pod suspended above a shallow pit of softly glowing fluid. Circuit veins ran from the walls into the cradle, their motions slow and alive. Hovering above the pod was a single floating cube, rotating, gently carved with glyphs that shifted as if reading their intentions. Kale scanned it, but his HUD spat static. Saris stepped closer. Her eyes reflected the shimmer of the cube. She reached for it slowly, as if something deep within her recognized its rhythm. The ether shard, she whispered. He looked at her. You've seen it before. No, she said, but it's been calling to me since I woke. The glyphs flared as her hand neared the cube. A soft chime rang out, deep, resonant, ancient. Without warning, the pod below unfolded. Panels slid open with liquid smoothness, revealing two human-sized impressions molded into its core. One was glowing. The other flickered dimly. Kale stared at it. Don't like where this is going. It's not asking, Saris replied, voice distant. It's inviting. She turned to him. Her skin shimmered again, just faintly. He could see it now. There was something in her changing. Not visibly, not biologically, but energetically. The resonance between her and the pod made the air buzz. Kale hesitated. You think it'll heal you? I think, she said, touching the rim of the pod, it will decide what's next. A moment of silence passed between them. And then, with a breath that tasted like inevitability, they stepped into the cradle. The instant their bodies met, the contours of the chamber light swallowed the room. Kale's senses drowned in blue. Heat wrapped around his limbs like silk woven with static. His breath caught his lungs, filled not with air but memory. Not his memory. Hers. He was standing in a Lissari corridor, red alert klaxons blaring, and her hands were bloody. He could feel her fury, her betrayal. She was being hunted by her own kind. Then another shift. He was back in the ruins of Virion, but not as Kale. He was looking at himself through Saris's eyes. She had felt his touch in that containment cell, like a breaking point, not of pain, but of belief. He gasped. Their minds were fusing. Not permanently, not fully, but enough to blur the border. Enough to feel one another's scars. The energy of the ether shard threaded between their forms. A wave of pressure struck Kale's chest. Not pain, but something more fundamental. It was as if something inside him cracked, and through that crack, her essence flowed. The world snapped back into shape with a rush. He was back inside the chamber. He lay still. Beside him, Saris blinked once slowly. Her chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm with his own. The pod dimmed. The cube above returned to its passive rotation. They sat up together. Kale touched his forehead. His veins shimmered faintly with residual light, then faded. Saris's hand drifted to her lower abdomen. "Something's different," she said. Kale turned to her. "You okay?" "I don't know." She stood slowly, her balance unnaturally perfect. Her posture was still hers, but something in the way she moved, the way she breathed, felt new. She didn't tremble anymore. Kale helped her down from the pod platform. The chamber's lights began to fade, returning to their slumber. As they reached the stairs, Kale's comm buzzed. A coded signal, fragmented and weak, but enough to make out the origin. A recon drone had picked up hostile movement inbound. Multiple signatures, unidentified. He swore under his breath, "We need to move." They climbed fast, hearts hammering. When they emerged into the terminal above, the moss had begun to darken. The structure itself seemed to recognize the urgency now pulsing through their veins. Kale guided Saris toward a secondary exit route, an old tram tunnel that led out toward the ravine sector. They ran. And as they ran, he could feel it the way their footfalls synchronized how they moved without needing words. Every turn she made, he anticipated. Every instinct he followed, she mirrored. Something had changed inside them. He'd known combat harmony before partners, brothers, teams who shared rhythm under fire. But this was different. This was biological. As they neared the outer gates, Kale turned to her. "What did it do to us?" Saris met his gaze. It revealed what was already there. Kale looked down at her hand still resting lightly on her abdomen and back up into her eyes. The connection between them didn't need language anymore. Whatever bond the ether shard had formed, it wasn't just neural. It was generational. The wind outside howled across the jagged remains of Sector 9 as Kale and Saris emerged from the hidden tunnel. The skyline was fractured high-rises snapped in half like brittle bones. Virion Spire's outer districts were nothing more than skeletons of alloy and rebar. The haze of ash gave the city an amber glow, beautiful in the way of dying stars. Kale's HUD pinged 3 red blips, incoming, fast. "They've got a lock on us," he muttered, adjusting the targeting scope on his shoulder mount. "Probably triangulated the pod activation." Saris nodded, her jaw clenched. She stood beside him, legs squared, eyes scanning the horizon. Her hand still hovered near her midsection where the faint resonance of the ether shard still hummed just beneath her skin. But the flickers of discomfort she'd shown earlier were gone. Her stance was different now, centered, still ready. Kale took note of it. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was prepared to fight. A low hum echoed across the ruined boulevard ahead. 3 shadowed figures emerged through the smoke. Obsidian core drones, humanoid plated in mirror-black exo armor glowing with violet tracers. One raised a weapon, and Kale fired first. The plasma bolt scorched the air and clipped the lead drone's shoulder. In the same instant, Saris lunged left, drawing a curved blade from her hip sheath, one he hadn't noticed until now. The blade shimmered with etheric energy pulsing in sync with her aura. She moved like gravity was optional. Kale covered her flank, pivoting into a crouch and firing again. 2 more drones dropped into view from the sky, repelling silently with anti-grav harnesses. It didn't matter. Saris was already moving. She blurred forward, her blade carving through a drone's armor with a hiss of pressure and light. Sparks burst in a ring around her as the creature collapsed. The second drone raised a kinetic shield too late. Saris drove her blade through its visor with surgical precision. Kale dropped another with a clean shot through the chest core. They were synchronized without speaking, without even glancing at each other. He'd pivot and she'd fill the gap. She'd lunge and he'd cover her back. It was like choreography, but raw, instinctual, forged in the cradle chamber below. They weren't 2 fighters anymore. They were 1 weapon. More drones came. Obsidian Core wasn't known for restraint. Their tactics were to overwhelm, suppress, dominate. But for the first time in Kale's career, he wasn't outmatched. He felt faster, sharper, as if her instincts flowed into his muscles through invisible threads. When he ducked to reload, Saris was already there, firing his sidearm with one hand while parrying a drone's blade with the other. Her eyes glowed faintly now. Not the combat HUD overlays Kale was used to, but something deeper, something primal. After the last drone fell, they stood among the wreckage, steam rising around them in shimmering pillars. Kale's breath caught in his throat. He turned to Saris. She didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. Effective. Kale's chest heaved. His muscles trembled not from exhaustion, but from the rush of power they'd just touched. You felt that too, right? Saris didn't answer with words. She stepped closer, and in that still moment between heartbeats, they both knew the ether shard hadn't just linked their minds. It had amplified them. They moved quickly after that, slipping through the broken industrial zones that ringed the outer valley. The tunnels beneath were cracked and unstable, but Saris guided them with uncanny certainty. Her internal sense of direction had sharpened. Kale suspected the shard was still pulsing inside her, giving her glimpses of buried maps or residual memories. They paused near the skeleton of a collapsed magrail bridge. Kale took the opportunity to recalibrate his sensors. A brief scan revealed something unexpected. His vitals were above standard. Reaction time up 22%. Oxygen efficiency up 14%. Neural load processing at 130% baseline. His systems weren't glitching. He was changing. He glanced at Saris. She sat cross-legged, head tilted back, breathing evenly. The curve of her neck, the way her skin caught the light, it wasn't just beautiful. It was luminous. And she was watching him. "You're adapting faster than I thought," she said softly. "Is that a good thing?" "It's a necessary thing." There was a pause, and then Kale asked the question that had been rising ever since the chamber. "What's happening to us?" Saris lowered her gaze. "I don't know. But I know it isn't just physical." Kale crouched beside her. "I can feel you," he admitted, "in ways I shouldn't. When you breathe, I feel the rhythm echo in my spine. When you move, it's like I've already seen it before." "The shard is symbiotic," she said. "It doesn't just heal, it synchronizes." He nodded slowly. "Then we're joined." "Not joined," she corrected. "Interfaced." Another pause. The wind stirred ash and heat between them. And then Kyle reached out. Not to grab, just to touch. His hand found hers, fingers grazing the back of her palm. And when contact was made, it was like a tuning fork being struck inside the bones of the planet. No flare of light, no dramatic pulse, just a shared silence that spoke louder than words ever could. A warning alert crackled in Kale's comm. "Obsidian core fleet inbound." He looked at Saris. "They're coming." She rose smoothly, her blade already sliding into her hand. "Then let them." The sky turned black with incoming vessels. From the crags above Vurion's scarred valleys, 6 warships dropped their cloaking fields at once. Matte black, shaped like predator fins, bristling with grav cannons and surface slicers. Obsidian Core didn't waste time. They arrived for seizures, not standoffs. Kale and Saris had barely reached the cliffside overlook when the first barrage hit. The blast radius lit the night like an artificial sunrise. Shockwaves cascaded down the ridge, peeling metal from bone as the old city screamed through its death throes once again. Kale shielded Saris with his body as debris pelted the rock around them. They landed in a crouch behind a rusted-out freight hauler, one of the last remnants of pre-siege commerce. Its shell might buy them a few seconds. Above, dropships fanned out like vultures. "They're not here to capture," Kale muttered. No, Cerise said, her voice tight. "They're here to erase." From the lead ship, a narrow shuttle emerged, sleek, armed, and unmistakable. Commander Theros. His presence pulsed across the battlefield like a tuning fork struck against the fabric of tension. Theros was more myth than man among the Obsidian Core, known for executing peace accords with orbital strikes and carving surrender into the architecture of cities. Kale exhaled. "He's early." Saris's grip on her blade tightened. "Or he's been tracking the shard longer than we thought." The dropships began releasing troops, rows of soldiers in hard-shell obsidian armor moving in disciplined waves. Not drones this time. These were elites. Kale activated the override on his pulse rifle. The barrel extended with a metallic hiss. "We can't fight them all," No, Saris said. "But we're not here to fight. Not unless we have to." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Then what are we doing?" She turned to him. "We're changing the game." Saris stepped out from behind the hauler. Kale started to grab her, then stopped. She glowed. Not metaphorically, literally. A faint aura of pale blue light rippled across her skin like heat distortion. The same resonance that had pulsed inside the chamber that had fused them together was now radiating from her like a signal beacon. And the soldiers paused. Not all at once, but enough. Their movements slowed. Weapons lowered slightly, helmets tilting. As if something in their neural interfaces was shorting, Saris walked forward, deliberate. Kale followed, her lead rifle lowered but ready. From the shuttle, Commander Theros stepped down, flanked by 2 armored guards. His armor was sleeker than the rest, segmented like an insect's shell with a dark crimson visor that revealed nothing. But his presence filled the space like a gravitational anomaly. Everyone shifted around it. He walked forward alone, each step measured. Then he stopped 10 meters from Saris and Kale. I want the shard, Theros said. His voice was calm, almost bored, modulated by the suit's harmonic dampeners. Hand it over and I may consider sparing you. Saris tilted her head slightly. It's not separate anymore. Theros didn't move. Lies. Kale stepped forward, eyes locked on the commander. It merged with her. It's biological now. Take it, and you kill her. That's acceptable. The words fell like iron. Cerise's body tightened, but Kale reached out, hand brushing hers. A pulse passed between them again. The shard merged within her, responded. Her skin flickered. Her eyes shimmered brighter. She took a slow breath. I don't think you understand, she said, voice deeper now, layered with something more than her own. It isn't just me anymore. We're joined, and what's growing inside me, and... Kale stiffened. Theros didn't blink. A hybrid. A future Saris replied, not a weapon. Theros' tone turned sharp. That child will destabilize every power structure in the quadrant. Good, Kale said. And then Theros raised a hand. Kill them. Soldiers moved. Kale dove, firing the moment his boots hit ground. His rounds struck center mass. 3 soldiers dropped. Saris surged forward, her blade igniting with a high-pitched scream. The battle erupted like a storm breaking across dry land. They moved as one, again Kale weaving between targets, Saris striking with blinding precision. She used the terrain like liquid, turning broken beams into perches and crater edges into ambush points. When she spun, the glow of her skin left streaks of light in the air. Kale trusted her without looking. If he ducked, she was there. If she moved, he knew the angle to support. The soldiers fell. Too many kept coming. And then Kale saw it, the pulse field on the ridge. A portable nullifier. They were preparing to sever her bond with the shard. He shouted, but Saris was already running. The device powered up, humming like a swallowed scream. Blue light arced towards Saris, her body convulsed. She dropped to one knee, blade falling from her hand. Kale roared. He sprinted forward, firing blind. The soldiers between him and the device crumpled under his fury. He hit the nullifier control panel with the butt of his rifle, shattering it into sparks. The field collapsed. Saris gasped, the glow flaring again. But something else happened. She rose and the air bent. A low-frequency hum rippled outward. Not sound, not light. Emotion. Kale's own chest vibrated. He felt it not from her, but through her. A pulse of life, of resistance, of unity. Every Obsidian Core soldier within range paused. One by one, visors flickered. Some dropped their weapons. Others screamed. Theros did not move. He stepped forward and drew a weapon unlike anything Kale had seen. Not a blade, not a rifle. A spine of black energy humming with annihilation. He lunged. Kale moved to intercept, but Saris was faster. She caught the blow mid-air with her bare hands, and didn't die. Instead, the shard flared inside her, and the weapon dissolved into sparks against her palms. She stared into Theros' mask eyes, unblinking, and whispered not in anger but in clarity. You fear what you can't control. Kale pulled her back, and together they sprinted for the ridge. The Obsidian Core closed in behind them, but the slope narrowed to a dead end, except for the old fusion launch pad. Still functional, still online. Kale slammed his hand against the interface. The escape pod hissed open. Only one left. Saris looked at him. You first. No way in hell. She climbed in. Kale followed. The hatch sealed. Seconds later, the launch flare lit the sky. Behind them, the war zone vanished into fire. The escape pod hurtled through the upper atmosphere like a dying comet, its shields flickering from the radiation bursts of the burning battlefield below. Virion Spire disappeared beneath a curtain of smoke and ash, its final ruins swallowed by the flames of yet another failed conquest. Inside the pod, Kale sat strapped beside Saris, every muscle rigid. His pulse had not yet slowed. The streaks of combat still played behind his eyes, flickers of falling drones' plasma fire, the tremble in Saris's hands when the nullifier hit. But she was stable now. He glanced over at her. She wasn't glowing anymore, not visibly. But there was a stillness in her body, a radiant poise that hadn't been there before. One hand rested on her lower abdomen, protective, instinctive. You all right? He asked, his voice roughened by smoke and adrenaline. She didn't look at him immediately. Her eyes stayed on the distant stars blooming past the viewport, as if she could already see the place beyond them, the one they might call home. Then she nodded. I'm not injured. Not what I asked. She turned slowly. Something inside me changed. Not just because of the shard. Because of us. Kale leaned forward, elbows on knees. His body ached, but his mind felt sharper than ever. He had felt the same resonance during that last moment on the cliff when Theros struck, when Saris caught the weapon in her hands and unraveled its destruction. The shard hadn't just fused with her biology, it had multiplied. Back in the chamber, he said slowly when we were inside that pod, That moment, it wasn't just a mind link. Saris touched the metal seam at her neck, the spot where the light used to leak out like breath from a wound. It was a seeding. Kale looked at her. The child. She nodded once. It's more than either of us. More than Lysari or human. The shard didn't just amplify, it evolved. He swallowed. How long before? It's not following our timelines, she said. Dr. Maven warned me. Lysari physiology adapts under stress. And with the shard accelerating that adaptation, Kale stared at her abdomen. You're all ready. Saris placed his hand over hers. What he felt under her palm wasn't just a heartbeat. It was a rhythm, ancient and new. It pulsed in harmony with her breath, and his own nervous system, like a third presence, had entered the room. A presence that already knew both of them, that recognized them not as hosts, but as conduits. A quiet awe settled over them. We're not alone anymore, she whispered. The pod's console chirped an inbound transmission, a beacon lock. Kale checked the signal. Unregistered frequency. Encrypted. Not core. Saris's gaze sharpened. Maven. Moments later, the pod's path adjusted subtly. Its orientation shifted toward a new vector, deep space out past the warzone sectors, heading toward the edge of mapped systems. There in the cold void, a glimmer appeared. A station. Small, isolated, drifting like a forgotten jewel among the stars. The transponder identified it as a research outpost, Calliope Station. Privately owned, hidden from faction registries. The voice over the comm confirmed it. Kale, Arden, Saris, Thane, you're clear for approach. Docking Bay 7, welcome home. They docked in silence. The hatch opened with a whisper of sterilized air. Inside, Dr. Elira Maven waited. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled into a tight braid. Her eyes as precise as the instruments lining the corridor behind her. She looked at Saris first, not with judgment, but reverence. You survived, she said. No, Saris replied. We became. Dr. Maven ushered them inside where medical scans and containment fields awaited not out of suspicion, but necessity. The readings confirmed everything Saris had feared and Kyle had hoped. The shard had fully integrated into fetal tissue. The child was stable, developing rapidly, but beyond all expectations. This isn't a hybrid, Maven murmured, studying the waveform overlays. It's a convergence. Saris lay on the diagnostic platform, her body relaxed for the first time since the chamber. Kyle stood beside her, watching the holographic projection of the child, already formed enough to exhibit traits of both parents, but with unique characteristics they couldn't classify. Maven turned. This child will be a beacon, Kale. Every power in the quadrant will come for it. I know. Do you also know what that means for you? Kyle looked at Saris. Her hand reached for his, instinctively. He took it. I do, he said. It means we protect what we made. Maven smiled faintly. You'll need help. We'll find it. Outside the viewport, Calliope Station drifted among stars, untouched by war. But Kyle knew peace was temporary. The core would return. The others would follow. No force in the galaxy could resist the signal now radiating from their child. But he also knew something else. The stars had changed course, and he was no longer just a smuggler. He was a father. Beside him, Saris closed her eyes. Among my people, she said softly, we have a saying. When the blood sings, the galaxy listens. Kale brushed a lock of her hair from her forehead. What's it saying now? That our story's just beginning. Outside, the cosmos rolled on. But for the first time, something new moved in its current, a force born not from conquest, but from connection. And in the quiet between worlds, Kyle and Saris held hands, their lives forever altered by a decision, a trigger, and a lie spoken on a rooftop long ago, because the safety had never been on. In the ashes of Virion Spire, what began as a smuggler's detour and a soldier's defiance became something far greater. A bond forged not in blood, but in shared instinct and ancient power. Kyle Arden and Saris Thane, two beings from worlds that should never have touched, became the bearers of a force, older than war, older than fear, the Ether Shard's final legacy. Together, they outran death, rewrote destiny, and brought into existence a child whose very heartbeat echoed across the stars. A living symbol of unity, of hope, of transformation. And somewhere in the dark corners of the galaxy, the factions still burn for power. But out here, beyond the edge of maps and memory, a new story begins. One not written by empire or war machines, but by a father, a mother, and the echo of a moment when a finger on the trigger changed everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Drop your thoughts below. What do you think happens to the child? Will Kale and Saris stay hidden forever? And if you'd like to see a sequel exploring the child's future and the return of the Obsidian Core, let us know. Until next time, fly true, stay strange, and never trust a safety switch.